call this hearing to order. Dr. Makary, thanks for being here. We appreciate it very much. I know that it's a busy day for you, and so appreciate you being here. And of course, Ranking Member Shaheen, thank you. Look forward to working with you on this Appropriations Subcommittee. You and I have worked before on Appropriations Subcommittee, and so I'm pleased now I have that opportunity here with Ag. Agriculture is incredibly important to my state, and I know the Ranking Member's state. What our great farmers and ranchers do every single day affects every American every single day with the highest quality, lowest cost food supply in the world. And of all the developed countries, Americans spend less of their budget on food, and they have better choice and better quality than any other country in the world, and we can't take that for granted. And so you'll find that we're pretty strong advocates for our farmers and ranchers.
Great.
We understand that your job at FDA is to keep people safe, whether it's it's primarily the drugs they eat, but many food products, obviously, as well. I've appreciated the conversations that we've had, and I must say, as I've told you in our conversations, I think you've got an incredible record in healthcare. I certainly believe that Johns Hopkins is one of the finest hospitals, medical centers in the country. I have direct personal experience, so I've taken family members to Johns Hopkins, and I've been impressed not only with the quality of healthcare, but with the culture of the people there and the caring. And then not only your tenure there, but all that you've accomplished is remarkable. And so we appreciate you're willing to take on this public service, this incredibly, incredibly important job. In it, you're going to have to, of course, primarily to make sure that our food and drugs are safe, that the organization is working as absolutely well as it can, which is why I appreciate your background not only in medicine but in business. Obviously, we're all trying to find savings across government to address the debt and the deficit. I know you've been charged with that task as well. But paramount, your job is safety. I understand, of course, they'll be releasing the MAHA report today. You're looking at new ways to do things. That's important. We need to do those kind of things. At the same time, there are practical realities, which you and I have talked about, that our farmers and ranchers face every day producing that highest quality, lowest cost food supply that I just referenced that benefits every American every single day. So whether it's the fertilizers, the pesticides, the equipment, all the things that go into them producing that food supply, they have to face the practical realities of operating in a market that every day they don't control. They don't control the weather. They don't control the prices. They don't control trade agreements, and on it goes. And when you look across our economy, so many industries are a few big companies that run the whole thing. I personally am not a fan of that. But when you look at agriculture, 16 million people directly or indirectly involved in agriculture, small family farms and businesses across this country that have become quite sophisticated with precision ag and everything else, and we do it better than anybody in the world and have higher standards. But that is what we have, and I firmly believe that that's what Americans want to make sure we have for long into the future. So I spent a little time on that in this opening statement because we have to be aware, you have to be aware of how that works. And as we make changes, again, making sure we do all we can for a healthy America, that we understand those realities and the challenges that those people have, and that we can't just take it for granted, and that we have to understand and make sure that all of this works for everybody on both sides of the equation. So with that, I'll turn to our ranking member, and I'm going to have to ask to excuse myself to vote. I may miss some of your opening statement, but I'll see if I can't get anything that I miss via the written remarks and then be back. Ranking member.
Well, thanks very much, Chair Hoeven, and let me just welcome, as you did, Commissioner Makary. Very nice to have you here this morning, and I would echo the Chair's commitment to agriculture and how important it is our farmers are to our food supply and to the economy of this country. It's a very different enterprise in New Hampshire with our farms because they are small family farms, but very important to the state nevertheless. But of course, this morning we're here to talk about the role of the Food and Drug Administration. Federal investment and stability in biomedical innovation are vital not just for our competitiveness and national security, but also for local economies in New Hampshire and across the country. Right now, we have the earliest access to new cures and treatments, and we attract the best talent from across the globe because of the good-paying jobs that are in emerging research. Those jobs fuel our small towns and cities, including in New Hampshire, where we have a growing industry in biomedical companies. It's very exciting to see the growth that's occurring in our state. As we speak, they're developing cutting-edge cell and gene therapies to cure terrible diseases like diabetes and cancer. And I think when we met, we talked about some of the work that's being done in New Hampshire, particularly at ARMI, the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute. But of course, to keep pioneering breakthroughs in curative treatments, they need stability and predictability, something this administration, sadly, has failed to provide so far. It's more than just a lack of stability. I fear the very mission of the FDA is at risk because of the actions of this administration. More than 4,000 people have been pushed out of FDA since January, the majority of those targeted by probationary terminations and reductions in force that don't seem to have any real analysis of who's important to keep and who is not critical to the mission. To date, this committee has not received key information on where specifically these workforce cuts are happening across centers and offices at the FDA, and that's information that we need as we're going to write this budget. What I want to emphasize is that it didn't really have to be that way. I think there is bipartisan support to see how we make our government agencies and departments more effective and efficient. But to do that, we need to have a process that people understand or are engaged in. And I fear that the process that's been done so far is going to prove to be very wasteful to patients and families in New Hampshire and across the country. Scientists at the FDA have been fired along with support staff who make their work possible, from those who assist with product reviewers to those who quite literally keep the lights on. Patients across this country are depending on the FDA, as you know, to review medical products to ensure that new and novel treatments are approved, and yet reports now suggest that medical product reviews have slowed, that essential meetings have been postponed or canceled, and that deadlines for user fee agreements have been missed. And as Congress has provided the FDA with new authorities and directives, from the Tobacco Control Act to the Food Safety Modernization Act to the Modernizing of Cosmetics Regulation Act, the FDA has hired talented people who have gotten the work done to keep the American people safe. Going backwards, I think, is unacceptable. I'm seriously concerned that the workforce cuts across the agency will harm the progress that this committee has supported on a bipartisan basis to ensure a strong FDA that supports innovative treatments and gives families peace of mind that the drugs we take, the food we eat, and the cosmetics we use are safe. Now, moving on to the fiscal year 2026 budget, which is the topic of this hearing, I wish we'd received and had a chance to review the full President's budget request prior to this hearing, though I would point out that that's not unique to FDA. We haven't gotten the details of the budget in any other appropriations hearings that I've been part of. The FDA was not mentioned in the preliminary budget materials we received 3 weeks ago, so we're sitting here today talking about a budget that this committee has not received. I'm disappointed to see the vast and drastic proposed cuts to the Department of Health and Human Services, and my priority is that the FDA has the resources that you need to carry out the core missions of the agency. But without a budget, it's hard for us to assume that the President's proposal will meet those goals. Now, in closing, the FDA at its core has an incredibly hopeful mission. The agency has the power to bring hope and comfort to millions of people by approving groundbreaking cures and treatments developed here in America by the best scientific minds in the world. So I think we on this committee stand ready to be partners in this effort, and I with that, Commissioner Makary, I appreciate your being here today again, and I look forward to hearing your statement and to the discussion that we will have with members of the committee about your budget proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hoven, and thank you, Ranking Member Shaheen, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for having me here to testify on the FDA budget for 2026. The Trump administration is proposing a $6.8 billion budget for the FDA, including $3.2 billion in budget authority and $3.6 billion in user fees for fiscal year 2026. This allows us to take the necessary steps to support the Make America Healthy Again agenda, as we have already been busy implementing. Now, I've been at the FDA for about 7 weeks, and I'm proud of the early progress we've made, working to remove all 9 petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply, eliminating unnecessary animal testing requirements for drugs. We approved a new blood test for Alzheimer's, which could help enable more early treatment. For the pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities overseas that the FDA inspects, there has been a routine of using scheduled inspections, which in my opinion are no inspections at all. They're a joke. And we are moving towards surprise inspections. We don't allow FDA inspectors anymore to accept limo rides from the pharmaceutical manufacturing companies that they are there to inspect. I'm amazed at some of the stuff that I'm learning when I look under the hood. We've begun taking action against new challenges, such as gas station heroin and childhood vaping with illegal Chinese vaping products. Our borders have been far too porous. Working with the Trump administration's re-energized Customs and Border Protection, we're not wasting any time. Today, we are announcing the seizure of nearly 2 million illegal vaping products from China. Last week, we announced plans to withdraw from the market chewable, ingestible fluoride tablets currently prescribed to 6-month-old babies. And this week, we published in the New England Journal of Medicine our framework for COVID vaccine booster regulation so that developers and companies can see what we're thinking and have predictability. And we are planning to bring back gold standard science and common sense. We also have to modernize. On day 1 of me being on the job, I actively began an effort to organize, to use AI for our scientific reviewers to make their jobs easier. Well, 2 weeks ago, we just announced our first AI-assisted review with the latest generation AI technology. One reviewer said that what normally took him 2 to 3 days, the AI did in 6 minutes. I've set an aggressive goal of June 30th to have AI-assisted scientific reviews help our reviewers agency-wide. And we're going to be ahead of schedule and under budget on meeting that aggressive goal. The goal is to reduce the paperwork burden of reviewers, which is tremendous, so that we can deliver more cures and meaningful treatments to the American people faster. That's been the first 7 weeks of my job at the FDA. Here are other important goals I have for the FDA, and we're already hard at work on them. Healthier food for children, a universal flu shot, meaningful treatments for ALS, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative disorders, treatments for rare diseases, cancer therapies that are so powerful a tumor is eliminated without the need for surgery or chemo. That's not a theoretical, that's something we've already seen. And one of my highest priorities is to ensure that we are not wasting any time in evaluating novel treatments for PTSD. Many of our brave veterans served in unnecessary wars, and we owe it to them. I've not yet hit the 2-month mark, so I'm doing a lot of listening. I appreciate all of your input, but one question we must ask is, why does it take over 10 years for a new drug to come to market? My team and I are working very actively to examine the approval process in all of its details so we can try to figure out how to deliver more cures and meaningful treatments and devices faster and in a more user-friendly way for developers without cutting any corners on the scientific review and independence. We're also committed to President Trump's promise to lower drug prices. At the FDA, we can help by bringing more low-cost generics and biosimilars to market, among many other strategies we're exploring. In conclusion, the FDA is filled with an enormously talented and committed group of employees representing, in my opinion, one of the greatest brands in the world. It's my duty to make sure that everybody central to the core mission has all the resources they need to do their job well. So I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makary. We're honored to have the chair of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Collins, with us. And Senator Hoeven went to vote, so he turned the gavel over to me. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, temporary chair. But it's been an honor to work with you on so many issues that we care about in this space, including type 1 diabetes in particular. Doctor, I appreciated hearing your comments this morning. Americans have relied on the FDA for more than a century to ensure that their medicines are both safe and effective. Recognizing that America biotech leads the world in innovation, we in Congress have taken a number of actions to ensure that FDA's rigorous regulatory review keeps pace with the speed of science and solves problems in areas where we don't have cures or effective treatments or a means of prevention. Recent staffing changes at the FDA appear to have affected the balance between innovation and regulatory review from what I'm hearing. I'm particularly concerned about the downstream impact of delays on patients suffering from debilitating rare diseases like ataxia and Barth syndrome, as well as more common terrible diseases like ALS, which you mentioned, Alzheimer's, and other neurodegenerative diseases. As I mentioned, Senator Sheehan and I'm sorry, I'm out of it today, apparently. Dr. We have worked together on type 1 diabetes for many years. We're encouraged by what's going on in stem therapy and immunotherapy in that area. And today, you yourself talked about the need for more efficient regulatory pathways and innovative treatments for rare life-threatening diseases, particularly when there are no major safety issues and existing treatments are either don't exist or they're limited. So what I'm hearing is there's a real slowdown at FDA. And that's not what you were committing to today, but that's what I'm hearing the reality is. There are a number of rare disease, new drug applications that have been pending at FDA for some time. What specifically is FDA doing under your leadership to accelerate getting new treatments for rare diseases to patients safely and as soon as possible, particularly since we have developed these accelerated pathways, particularly for those patients for which there are no treatment options now?
Senator Collins, good to see you, Senator Collins. I share in your interest in this topic because I have cared for people with rare diseases and rare cancers, and it is the worst feeling in the world to have to break bad news. And when people say, is there anything out there to not have anything to respond with, is a very difficult position. So we need to customize the regulatory process to the condition being treated. And so If it is a rare condition, we have to drop our randomized control trial requirements in some instances. I will say, however, that the trains are running on time at the FDA. There have been no staffing changes that have changed any approval schedules. We are on track to meet all of our PDUFA targets. There are, on occasion, every year, essentially every year, a couple drugs that are very complex where the career scientists ask for more time, either to convene an advisory committee to weigh in or to design a very unique, specific randomized trial. So in reference to one of the products that you had mentioned, I had gotten briefed and was assured that there was no delays related to staffing. These were additional time because of the complexity of the early data, and the staff truly, the career scientists truly believed they needed a few more weeks. And I thought, we're on track to meet our PDUFA targets. They believe we're completely on track to meet our PDUFA targets if they took a few more weeks, and I thought that was reasonable. The trains are running on time. The food inspectors are doing their job. We have 12 food labs. There's no backlog at the food labs. The cuts that you referenced and Senator Shaheen referenced were to things like this. 2,600, this is at the FDA, 2,600 HR staff, contract staff, and budget staff. Now, I think that's too much, and they were part of the reduction in force. In total, about 1,800, almost 1,900 people were involved in the reduction in force, and I think a lot of that is consolidation. Just to be clear, there were no reductions in scientific reviewers as a part of the reduction in force. And we're actually hiring scientists because there's normally turnover with our scientific staff, and I hope the AI and the other tools will help make their jobs more efficient.
Well, I am hearing something entirely different, so I will convey directly to you the concerns that I'm hearing since Dr. Peter Marks was removed from his position. And it is disheartening for patients with serious diseases, as you know very, very well from your clinical practice, for which I know you are a dedicated physician, but it is disheartening when it appears that a new treatment or drug is on the horizon, and then FDA says, no, we need 3 more months, we need 3 more months, we need 3 more months, over and over again, despite the years that have gone into developing a particular treatment for an illness that has no treatment. And again, that's why we work so hard to establish these accelerated pathways. So I'll be in further touch with you. I don't disagree with the need to look at the staffing of FDA and to make sure that as much of it as possible is going into the process that speeds food inspection, new drugs to the American people, sensible regulation and guidance on diet, lifestyle factors. All of that is extremely important. So it's not that I object to looking at that, but I don't want it to come at the expense of drugs that are desperately needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I will just say that the scientist replacing Peter Marks is outstanding, and I would say take a close look at his credentials. He has published over 540 peer-reviewed scientific articles. He's a professor from UCSF, trained at the National Cancer Institute. He's a scientific genius. So I've rejected the idea that there's only one scientist in the world that can run CBER well, and I think we need fresh new ideas. The new scientist to replace Peter Marks is 42-year-olds. He brings a fresh new perspective, and it will not change our approach to rare diseases or the predictability that people need in the market and development investment space to know that they need to continue to invest in those technologies.
I look forward to meeting him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate you being here. Doctor, you came into roughly a 19,000-person agency. Your budget, top line's about 3% less. But there's been estimates as high as potentially 4,000 reduction in force, voluntary or actual RIFs. Where are you on that, and how's it going? You and I, again, talked about this before. I was, you know, and at that time, we talked about how once you got in there and had more time, you were going to obviously have a better analysis of what your needs are and where you're at with the personnel situation. So go through that for us, will you?
Sure. So there have been about nearly 1,900 people involved in the reduction in force, roughly another 1,200 plus involved in the early retirement package. We are hiring scientists to replace scientists that may have left for an early retirement. But no scientific reviewer or inspector was cut as a part of the reduction in force. Now, any discussion of the reduction in force, I believe, deserves one important fact of context, which is always omitted in the media coverage, and that is in 2007, the FDA had a little over 9,000 employees, and a few months ago it was 19,000. So there was a 100% increase in the number of employees at the FDA over the last 15, 16 years, and that is how we get 2,600 HR people, contracts and budget people at the agency. 380 communications positions. We're now down to about 160. They're doing a good job. 160 people. That covers a lot of the communication work. Did we need 125 travel coordinators and travel offices in each center, or 13 strategy offices at the FDA? A lot of this reorganization is smart, and it's being smart with taxpayer dollars, because I personally believe when this institution here, U.S. Congress, is spending $2 trillion more than we have as a country, it is driving inflation, which is a backhanded tax on the poor, and that is the harsh reality. It doesn't affect people with wealth like myself. It affects the 50% of Americans that have less than $500 of cash on hand, and they are forgotten when we spend too much money and we drive inflation, and that's why I support many of these reductions in force where it makes sense.
Okay. But you also get fee agreements from, drug companies that want to get new drugs to the market, and so you have to be able to staff for that so that you bring in that fee revenue, which of course is not a cost to the taxpayer. So I agree with you. Yeah. We need to find better ways to do things. We need to find savings, and that's good. But talk to us how you're making sure that you manage things. I mean, again, paramount, your mission of safety, as we talked about in the front end. I know you understand that. You're a doctor. Took the Hippocratic Oath. But those fee agreements make it more complicated, but they bring in revenue. Talk about that, as well as making sure we get these new drugs to the market as safely and efficiently as possible, because that ultimately saves lives.
Yes, Senator. So thank you for that question. And again, I want to reassure the public to see through the headlines and to know that the trains are running on time at the FDA, and we're on track to meet all of our user-fee targets as an agency. And we need the staff to help with the user fee management, and that's why I've made sure that we have the appropriate staff to make sure that we can report on our user fees and sort of serve as conductors in managing the user fee targets. Now, look, I'm a surgeon, and so the reductions in force are never perfect, so I have done everything humanly possible since I've gotten there to try to make sure we heal and reorganize appropriately. We have brought back some people, and my job is to make sure that the scientists and inspectors, that the law enforcement officials at FDA have all the resources they need to do their job well.
Okay. I think I'm going to give you a short question, save my long, well, no, I'm going to go with a longer one. I'm going to probably run over my time a little bit, ranking member, so I'll beg your indulgence and certainly return the favor. The Maha Commission's coming out with their, report, I think pretty much right after this hearing.
Yeah, noon.
Yeah, so if you want to kind of give us all the details right now, that's great, and just get a jump on things. But guessing that you might not, you do need to talk to us about it in that, as I laid out in my opening statement, this committee has jurisdiction both in regard to all of your funding at FDA, but also USDA for our farmers and ranchers. And we have to address both. So I know you're coming out, HHS writ large is coming out with this Maha study plan today. But as I said in my opening, we're very concerned not only how that's going to affect the American consumers, but also how that's going to affect agriculture. And as you know, agriculture goes, I mean, they're regulated like everybody else. In fact, in my opinion, they're over-regulated like everybody else. And so, with this report coming out, yeah, I get y'all are going to be working very hard to make sure it's scientifically based and all that. But a lot of what our farmers and ranchers in producing that food supply have had to do, that's all scientifically based too, heavily regulated, and there's been years and years and years of that analysis and regulation done, and a heck of a lot of expertise. So, how do you approach that in this plan of action and the analysis that you're doing and so forth, and the studies you're doing, to make sure that that's adequately included in terms of your evaluation and the results and the recommendations that you make?
Well, Senator, you shouldn't be concerned about the Maha report. It is simply information, and it's important information about health, written by people who have excellent citations and are representing the many scientists that have been waving a flag in the air for many years saying, hey, look at root causes. We have the sickest, most disabled, most medicated, most obese population in the history of the world. Half our nation's kids are sick. And why are they sick? Because when the immune system or some inflammatory response is reacting to the many different chemicals that go down their GI tract, they feel blah, they don't feel well. And so we have got to look at root causes. Now, there's no single chemical in the food supply that is accounting for a root cause for the driving our chronic disease epidemic, but I think everything has to be on the table. We, for example, at the FDA just convened 2 days ago a roundtable on talc. Now, talc has been identified as a cancer-causing agent. It's been removed from baby powder. There have been 30 studies saying that talc may cause ovarian cancer in women with a high odds ratio and statistical significance. International cancer bodies have warned about the cancer-causing effect and the mechanism of talc, and so it's been removed from baby powder. But do you know kids are eating talc every day? It's in candy. You take chewing gum and the white powder on there, people think it's sugar. Sometimes it's talc. Talc is in our food supply. Kids are eating talc. And it's not just in food, it's in medicines. The number 1, 3, 9, and 10 most common medications in the United States have talc on it. Why? Because it's a lubricant. It's just the way we've been doing business. It's a lubricant in the machines when it's mass produced. Well, there's a low-cost alternative that is generally considered to be safe. We're not fighting anybody here. We're trying to bring the latest scientific information to inform good decisions. And I think you're going to be pleased with the Maha Commission report. It puts at the forefront of our discussions of health many issues that scientists have been talking about for years. Never in my oncology meetings did we talk about the root causes of cancer. Cancer's going up in kids. Young people under age 50, everyone's scratching their heads. You get a diagnosis. They come to Johns Hopkins. We would look at them, and parents would say, what could possibly cause this? Well, guess what? We don't talk about any of this in our national conferences. That is what the Maha Commission report is going to talk about. What have we been talking about? Insulin, chemotherapy, CAR T therapy, radiation, sophisticated operations. We've got to talk about food and chemicals, not just chemo and insulin. And so this Maha Commission is going to put front and center as setting our research priorities, setting a national conversation, setting our own internal goals, so that we're going to deliver in another 100 days from today some of what we're going to do. The Maha Commission report is a diagnosis, and I think we have to do something differently. We have a healthcare system that's breaking the budget, that's resulting in inflation, that's burdening businesses, that's the #1 cause of household bankruptcy in the United States is medical bills, and no one is talking about the root cause, and that is the health of the population that is actively deteriorating right in front of our eyes. And so we've got to move from a reactionary healthcare system where we're playing whack-a-mole with all these treatments in the hospital and late stages and talk and be proactive and actually talk about the root causes and why we don't see some of these problems in other countries. I think this report is going to be the cornerstone of a broader discussion, and there's no one single ingredient that's going to be vilified.
So after the report comes out, after we do some work on your budget, we're going to want you to come back and talk to us. Are you going to be willing to do that?
Of course, I love to talk.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Ranking Member Sheehan.
Well, thank you, Chair Hoven, and I certainly agree with you that we ought to focus on the root causes of what's causing diseases. And I've been trying for years to change the sugar subsidy system that we have that encourages sugar to be added to our food supply in so many ways. But so far, there hasn't been the political will to do that. So one of the things that I would urge you to do, Chair Hoven suggested that we would like to have you come back and talk about this. I hope that there will be more of an effort to engage Congress in the changes that you're talking about making than there was in the cuts that were made. Because again, I think there's a lot of appetite to try and look at how we do things better. But boy, there's not an appetite to have one person and a DOJ commission go around and make all these decisions without engaging Congress, because so much of that has not only been not well received, it's been outright illegal. That's not your problem, but I hope as you think about looking at the changes that we need to make to get at root causes, that you will come back and engage with us on what you're proposing, because there's a lot of expertise on this committee, and I'm sure a lot of ideas for what we ought to do better too. But I want to go back to diabetes, one of the most expensive chronic illnesses we have. It's one that you and I talked about.
Yeah.
Senator Collins and I have done a lot of work as co-chairs of the Diabetes Caucus on this. As I explained to you, for me, it's not just a policy issue, it's a personal issue. I have a granddaughter with type 1. So I know the struggles that the community has had, and many of those with the FDA before you got here, but they have been real. And one of the issues right now that I'm hearing from the diabetes community is about C-peptide, which is a marker of the body's own insulin production. It's emerging as a potentially more accurate tool for measuring how well a person's cells are functioning. However, the FDA does not currently recognize C-peptide as a validated surrogate endpoint, meaning that the community has to use other endpoints that are less, many people believe, less accurate. So will you commit to reviewing C-peptide as a validated surrogate endpoint?
I'm happy to, Senator. I love C-peptide. I'm a pancreatic specialist, and so I don't understand why it would not be recognized. It is a naturally occurring hormone that is an indicator of the physiologic health of the pancreas. So I'll take a look at that for you. Happy to.
Good, thank you. I hope we can stay in touch on that. In the last couple of days, there have been a lot of news reports about the COVID-19 the development. So I was surprised to hear about the FDA's announcement earlier this week that would limit access to COVID-19 boosters. And it seems like the announcement would take away people's ability to make that choice on their own by limiting it to only people 65 or at high risk. So can you help us understand why that decision was made and why people who may think that that booster would be helpful to them will no longer be available?
Happy to. It's been 4 to 5 years since we've had a randomized controlled trial, and so we don't know the right number of boosters that a healthy American should take. What is that number? Is it 2, like the MMR vaccine? Is it 2 or 3, like HPV or hepatitis B? Or is it 80? Do we believe in giving 80 mRNA shots to a healthy girl born today and her average lifespan of 80 years? Is that the right answer? That has been a theory, that the repeat booster strategy in healthy individuals is the correct evidence-based strategy, but there's been no data to support it. So we are doing our job to say that if we're going to approve a COVID vaccine for younger, healthy Americans, we'd like to see some clinical trial data, given that it's a much different population from 5 years ago. There's broad, ubiquitous population-based immunity, and there's also a different virus circulating, and this is a new vaccine formulation that creates a new protein in the body. Should we blindly rubber stamp a vaccine that creates a new protein in the body every year for the rest of our lives for the next 100 years? I don't think so. And so that's why we published in the New England Journal of Medicine this week a framework for sensible COVID vaccine booster regulation in the United States that uses an age-stratified approach. And really, honestly, we are catching up with the rest of the world. Some of the rest of the world has been laughing at us using this blind strategy. We're now switching to a scientific strategy. The UK only recommends COVID boosters in people 75 years of age and high risk. France, 80 years of age and high risk. I don't think we should be pushing this on healthy 6-year-old girls without any evidence every year for the rest of their lives. And so that's why we've outlined this framework. And by the way, the vaccine manufacturers put out positive statements about the framework because I believe they like predictability.
Well, so I understand that rationale. Do you have a timetable for when you expect to have the trials done and a decision made about the future?
But when the companies present trials to us, and in the case of high risk, our New England Journal paper outlines how they can seek clinical trial data after approval in high-risk populations. But it's up to the companies to present data to us. It's always been that way, where the FDA reviews clinical trial data that companies present, and we make a decision about safe and effective. We have been suspending that role for the last 4 years with COVID boosters. And so we're saying this is a reasonable time to check in and look at clinical trial data, given how different it is. By the way, America doesn't want COVID boosters.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm out of time, actually. I assume that you have you're talking to some of those companies, so you have some idea of their level of interest in coming back to do those clinical trials and what they may be thinking about in terms of a time frame.
Look, some of these companies made $100 billion in the COVID booster. They can afford to run a clinical trial, and they have time to run a clinical trial. The VRBPAC meeting meets later today to pick a strain. So there's time and there's money. We're setting a common sense framework.
Yeah, but I get that.
85% of healthcare
Are we talking about 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years? I'm just trying to get some idea so that when people call our office and ask, when I run into people and say, well, how come I can't get the COVID booster, that we can give them some kind of an answer for what they can expect.
85% of healthcare workers said no to the last COVID boosters. You're not suggesting that we blindly approve COVID boosters each year without clinical trial data.
You're not listening to me, Dr. Makary.
Is that what
I'm not asking for a blind approval. I'm saying that I understand the argument you're making. What I'm asking you is, do you have any time frame for when you think this might happen? And I'm sure you're talking to pharmaceutical companies so that they might have some idea so that we can just answer questions from the public. Part of what I'm objecting to here is that all of these decisions are being made without engaging the public, and I think that's a problem.
The public has said no to COVID boosters. 70% of the public has not gotten a COVID booster, and they don't trust us because
You're
there's
still
no
not answering my question, though.
So the time frame,
do you not have any idea?
The time frame is reasonable, and it is amicable to what the industry thinks they can do. And so we've had these conversations, and we do with industry. I can't share individual product conversations with the
I'm not
manufacturers,
asking
but
you to
they
do that.
think that the timeframes that we've outlined are reasonable, and we think they're reasonable.
But you still haven't said what they might be.
Well, there's plenty of time between now and the fall, and so there's plenty.
So you're looking, you think it's going to be more of a short-term timeline?
So we, in the
This is
high-risk
not a
group,
trick question. I'm not trying to trick you here. I'm just trying to get some answers.
and I'm not trying to not answer your question. It's just different for each age group. For young, healthy individuals, we have a different time frame from the high-risk community, where we are approving the COVID. Well, I shouldn't say we are, because we haven't reviewed all the data and all the applications are not in. But for high-risk individuals, we do have a framework now by which they can run the trials after the approval in high-risk individuals throughout the COVID season, and then Americans will know it either works or doesn't work. So it's roughly a year. It's roughly a year. In Operation Warp Speed, they ran that phase 3 clinical trial over the summer, and if they want to do the same thing, there's plenty of time, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Makary, for being here and joining us on the Hill today. We've discussed the issue of chemical abortion before. However, I'd like to revisit the topic in light of new data published last month by the Ethics and Public Policy Center. This data reveals a much higher risk from the abortion drug, mifepristone, than previously acknowledged. And this raises the questions whether it's time to reconsider the broadly unrestricted access to the drug. It makes me question if the FDA should reinstate the original safeguards in order to protect vulnerable women and minors from experiencing the horrible adverse and life-threatening complications that could follow the chemical abortion regimen. First, let me summarize the new data. In April 2025, researchers from Ethics and Public Policy Center and the Foundation of the Restoration of America reviewed the outcomes of 865,000 plus drug-induced abortions from 2017 to 2023. These abortions occurred after the FDA in 2016 removed the requirement for doctors to report non-fatal but adverse complications. The data shows that 94,605 serious adverse events, proving conclusively that more than 1 out of 10 women are put at risk by the mifepristone. This real-world rate is 20 times greater than the rate the FDA used when it originally approved the drug. Specifically, this data shows that, quote, their words, 10.93% of women experience sepsis, infection, hemorrhaging, or other serious adverse events within 45 days following the chemical abortion. If serious complications have increased as safety rules have been loosened over the last 25 years, then logically it makes sense to bring those safety protections back. At the very least, the FDA should restore the original safety requirements from 2000 under its risk evaluation and mitigation strategies. How do you view this new data, and will the FDA be taking this new data into consideration and commit to restoring common sense protections like requiring an in-person doctor visit before women can actually access mifepristone?
Thank you, Senator Hyde-Smith, and good to see you again. I think a lot of people are asking those questions, and so I did see those top-line results that you referenced, and we are going to take a look at those data as they become available. There is no peer-reviewed publication, and the underlying data set is not available, but when it does become available, we're going to take a hard look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. I would appreciate that very, very much.
Thank you.
Senator Rossa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Makary, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for joining us. I was pleased to see that the Secretary has made the safety of infant formula a priority for the department. Is that correct?
That's right, and the FDA will be convening the world experts on infant formula June 4th, and we're going to be having a robust discussion because parents want infant formula options with a better supply chain and without added sugar and seed oils.
Did you see a recent Consumer Reports study which found that of 41 tested infant formulas, more than 30 were found to have potentially dangerous levels of lead.
Yeah, heavy metals in infant formula is something that's getting a lot of attention, as it should, and so that is part of Operation Stork Speed to take a hard look at that, and it is one of the priorities of our infant formula roundtable at the FDA on June 4th.
And it's the Human Foods division of your agency responsible for infant formula safety, at least in large part, yes?
Yes.
Trying to make sure I understand some of the relevant personnel decisions, given the concern that families in Georgia have about the safety of infant formula, the safety of the food supply. James Jones, the Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods, submitted a resignation letter February 17th, included the quotes, quote, "The indiscriminate firing of 89 staff in the Human Foods program is beyond short-sighted. The foods program staff at FDA is the envy of the world in its technical, professional, and ethical standards." It goes on, "The employees fired this past weekend are the most recent hires and generally come to federal service with the most recent education and represent the future of the agency. They included staff with highly technical expertise in nutrition, infant formula, food safety response, and even 10 chemical safety staff hired to review potentially unsafe ingredients in our food supply." That was February 17th. You were asked on April 17th whether any of the personnel reductions had included personnel responsible for food safety or infant formula safety. You said, quote, "There were no cuts to scientists or reviewers or inspectors, absolutely none." You were asked on April 23rd on CNN and said, quote, again, "There were no cuts to scientists or inspectors." But then just 2 days later, an HHS spokesperson confirmed that, in fact, scientists had been fired and that you were scrambling to rehire them. Is that, did you in fact say on April 23rd there were no cuts to scientists or inspectors? Just before we get into the details, is that an accurate quote?
No scientific reviewer was cut as a part of the reduction in force.
So you said there were no cuts to scientists or inspectors. Didn't you say that?
My understanding was that there were no cuts to the scientific staff, but specifically the scientific reviewers is what I was referring to.
But you said there were, it's
Jones
a very
is an
straightforward question. You
economist.
said there were no cuts to scientists or inspectors, correct?
Scientific reviewers
No,
is
you
what I was
said-
referring to. That's the vast majority of scientists there.
And
Jim
then-
Jones
and then
is an economist.
5 days before, you had said there were no cuts to scientists. You said that, right?
I was referring to scientific reviewers. There are a
But
couple
scientists had been
research-
fired, correct?
There have been research scientists in some labs that have been doing some research. Some of that research is good, some of it is not good, and so there have been no cuts to scientific
And
reviewers.
in fact, scientists who study the safety of infant formula had been fired, correct?
I'm not aware of any scientist who studies infant formula
Well,
that has.
Here's the reporting in the New York Times, which says the HHS spokesman said those employees called back had been inadvertently fired, and the decision to rehire specialists on outbreaks of food-related illnesses and those who study the safety of products like infant formula. So is this reporting accurate? Had, in fact, scientists who study outbreaks of food-related illnesses and the safety of infant formula been fired?
The reason it's not
No, it's-
accurate, Senator, is that people were not fired. They were scheduled for the reduction in force. And that was before I got there. When I got there, we did an assessment. And so some of those individuals out of the 19,000 were restored. Jim Jones was an economist, and he was upset about the Doge cuts, so he self-doged. He was not fired. I wish he would have stayed.
Have
but he
all
chose to leave.
scientists responsible for food safety and infant formula safety been rehired or reinstated?
Look, we have not reduced in force the scientific review staff. I know where you're going with this. We're not allowed
I'm
to
trying to
let
get
go a
clarity on your
single
statements.
person.
You said there were no cuts to scientists, and then the HHS spokesperson said, actually, there were cuts to scientists, and now we're trying to rehire them. I mean, so it gives the impression you're not sure about the personnel actions ongoing in your own agency, and that's
Again,
the
no one
indication
was
from your
cut.
testimony
No
here
one
again
was-
today.
No one was cut in the reduction of force. They were scheduled for the reduction in the future. Down the road, it has not happened yet. So the people scheduled to be cut, we did a review and found some research scientists. When I made those statements, it was very specific. I was very clear. We're talking about scientific reviewers because the trains have to run on time. And if you're concerned about
My time
the
is up. My
backlog
time is
in
up. But you were
labs-
very specific. You said there were no cuts to scientists, and then 5 days later, there were no cuts to scientists. Those are your direct quotes. There were no cuts to scientists, but there were cuts to scientists.
No, there were
correct?
no cuts to scientists because people were scheduled for the reduction in force down in the future, and the people scheduled were reevaluated, and we restored a couple research scientists, and I was referring
How
not
many?
only to them, but
How many?
to the scientific reviewers.
How many scientists responsible for preventing outbreaks of food-related illnesses and the safety of infant formula have been restored or reinstated?
There were no scientists that were in charge of preventing outbreaks that were part
I
of
didn't
the
say in
reduction.
charge.
But I mean, this is the problem in government. Somebody has a fancy sounding name like infant formula safety, and no one can ever touch them, even if they're not doing their job.
Okay, I'll tell you
even
what,
if
how about
it's
this?
redundant.
I'll send you, so that you can get accurate information to the committee, I'll send you some very detailed questions about this, and you'll respond in full, yes?
Yes, just keep in mind, the agency was half its size in 2007. We didn't have
But you'll
outbreaks
respond in
and
full.
rampages and food
Well,
outbreaks.
we had a huge infant formula safety crisis in this country just a few years ago. Do you recall that?
That was because of several problems,
Yeah,
including.
but so you will respond in full to the questions that I send you.
I'm
yes?
always happy to respond in full.
Thank you
to
so much,
Senator.
Dr. Makary. Thank you.
Doctor, I know that, that you're working on Operation Stork Speed, speaking of baby formula, that Secretary Kennedy's already talked about Operation Stork Speed, which goes right to this issue.
Yes.
And you're already working on it, made it a priority. Would you like to address that?
We're working hard on it, and that's why we're convening the world's experts. And the part of the problem with infant formula that the senator is alluding to, which is a real problem, is that the FDA has been so rigid in the way it evaluates infant formula. Basically, we have for decades said, you have to follow this recipe because we as the government know exactly what infants need and you can't deviate from this recipe. And guess what? They got added sugar on there and seed oils, and there's been no innovation in infant formula practically since 1998 when we saw the last change in infant formula on the monograph recipe, with the exception of selenium that was added. Basically no innovation in infant formula since 1998, and so that's what we're working to fix. That is one of the underlying problems. The more innovation, the more competitors that can come to market, the more predictability with the regulatory process, the better products we're going to see, more options for moms that want infant formula that's safe, low in heavy metals, without seed oil, without added sugar, and that is, I think, going to help also lower prices and increase the supply chain.
And of course, moms know, but there needs to be a choice in that baby formula so that you've got the product you need for your child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're all about choice.
Yeah, and so there's a lot to it, and I commend you for, and the secretary for making that a priority. And I do like the name Operation Stork Speed. That's a great name. I don't know if you came up with it or the secretary did, but it's a good one.
I did not, but I'll pass all along to the person that did that you like.
And the other thing is, this seems like a timely thing to say because the senior senator from the state of Michigan just showed up, and he and I actually have legislation on baby formula, bipartisan legislation. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it yet, but I would ask that you work with us on it because it goes to some of these very same things. And I think we worked very hard to make it very practical, actually reflecting some of the things you just talked about. How do we make sure safe, but we innovate and have choice?
It's great legislation, Senator. Thank you for working on it.
Well, that was the right answer. I've got another question, but I'm going to turn to Senator Murray before I ask my final question, and then, of course, Senator Peters. Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Hoven. Look forward to working with you on this really important committee. You know, Commissioner Makary, the FDA has a really important job to do. Lives literally are at stake, and that work requires the utmost diligence and care and commitment to following the science and uploading FDA's gold standard. We all expect to walk into the drugstore and know that what we are buying has passed a safety and efficacy standard, and we have to be assured of that, and we have to be assured that the work's been done, that we don't have to question that. So I don't think it's careful leadership when you do mass fire 1 in 5 people across FDA, only to frantically then bring some back because you didn't stop and think 2 seconds about whether those jobs were actually important. We really, Mr. Chairman, cannot cheap out on the FDA and expect to maintain that gold standard that means that people know that drugs are safe. We can't just cut and hope nobody gets sick when you're slow to issue a recall, or hope no one needs that medicine that had its approval delayed, or hope there isn't another infant formula issue while your staff are getting fired or getting rehired or wherever they are. This work really takes investments. This committee knows that, and it expects expert staff, like the people that have been shoved out the door. Drug approvals are already getting delayed. Food and drug safety inspections are lagging behind. We are going in the wrong direction fast. We still have yet to see from you a full budget request. That is unacceptable. You are now testifying that the budget proposes to slash FDA by more than 11%. That's actually news to all of us, and I'll tell you right now, it is not going to fly. It's reckless, and it's not going to happen as long as I have anything to say about it. Now, Commissioner Makary, when it comes to your mass firing of FDA employees, in April you said, quote, "I can tell you there were no cuts to scientists or inspectors." Well, that is not true. I think Senator Ossoff covered that, and I think the point here is that all of this firing and rehiring, I don't see how that's efficient. Frankly, it kind of shows that you don't know what you're doing and that you're breaking things in the process here. And so let me ask you a question, and hopefully it is an easy one for you. Does it save taxpayer dollars to fire staff who work in centers that are fully funded by user fees, not taxpayer dollars, yes or no?
Nice to see you again, Senator Murray. You asked me to do an assessment of the staff when I came here for my confirmation hearing. And I hear that you're criticizing me for bringing back some individuals after the cuts that I was not a part of.
No, I'm saying that's good. I'm just saying in the long run, this has been very inefficient. But my question to you is not about that. And I know you've covered it with several other members. So does it save taxpayer dollars to fire staff who work in centers that are fully funded by user fees, not taxpayer dollars? Is that efficient? Does it save money?
The cuts were to HR, IT, communications. There were 2,600
But they're funded by
HR
user
staff.
fees. They're funded by user fees.
In part.
It is not saving any
In
money.
part.
Well, many of the staff you fired were in centers that are actually fully funded by user fees. You know that, correct?
So if we have 2,600 HR people, do you want me to not make any cuts to
No,
that
I'm
number?
asking you a specific question about the centers that are fully funded by user fees.
That's one center. It's the tobacco center.
Well,
And so
okay, well, let me
you
just
said we
say-
can't just keep cut and cut. We can't keep hiring and hiring. The agency doubled since 2007. So let me ask you, what is the right number of
No,
employees?
you're
that the
here to
HR
answer my questions, sir,
Okay.
and I'm going to ask some more. Without critical support staff you fired, inspectors cannot plan their trips. They cannot do their jobs. I want to ask you, what % of planned inspections has FDA missed since those April 1st firings?
In the 12 labs that we have that evaluate food products in the food inspection realm, there are no, as of last week, I just did a check, there are no backlogs. They are running at 100% efficiency. There are no drug approval delays despite the, what people
Well,
want to
that is
attribute.
not what I have been told. I have been told, and I would like you to go back and check and report back to us, because we know that some of the planned inspections at these that were supposed to take place have been missed. And to me, why that's so important, if there is not inspections, the public doesn't have the information that they need. I am going to run out of time, so I want to move on.
Yeah, there were no cuts to inspectors.
Will you go back and check for me, please?
Absolutely.
I understand, and by the way, inspector's one thing, but if you don't have the support staff to make sure that they know
Yeah,
where
but
they're going.
2,600 HR staff and procurement
Okay,
staff?
I understand that the FOIA staff producing documents related to ongoing litigation by the Children's Health Defense, Senator Kennedy's organization, were shielded from the RIF, while other FOIA staff are responsible for FOIA responses at other FDA centers were targeted for termination. Is that true?
That's not true, Senator. We have our FOIA staff. They continue to work at the FDA. I've made sure that all the FOIA staff at the FDA are doing their job. We are also using AI to reduce the burden on that staff.
Well, for the record, my understanding is that the Children's Health Defense FOIA staff were not fired when other ones were.
All the FOIA
And
staff are there.
And that seems like a real conflict of interest to me, considering that the Secretary's extensive history with that organization, Children's Health Defense, and his goal to remove authorizations for vaccines. So I just want that on
It's
the
not
record.
true.
Well,
All FOIA staff are in place.
okay, so if a study came out saying that people who took a certain medication experience a certain rate of, quote, serious adverse events, but the study's authors refused to say what they were counting as an adverse event, would that raise serious questions for you about the study's validity?
Yes, Senator. So I have the natural inquisition of a scientist that's done a lot of research, so I would want to see the underlying data, yes.
Okay. Well, I am, of course, talking about the sham study from the Ethics and Public Policy Center. It's an anti-abortion group. It's bankrolled by extremists. They fought to overturn Roe v. Wade. And this study, if you can call it that, is unsound and has been widely panned by medical experts. But days after its release, you and Secretary Kennedy are now suggesting that we need a, quote, complete review on the safety of mifepristone. Now, to be clear, mifepristone has been proven safe and effective in more than 100 studies over 3 decades. And the people that are now pushing that bogus study and saying that mifepristone is dangerous for women are the exact same people who think that abortion is never necessary to save a woman's life and that 10-year-olds should somehow be forced into childbirth. I believe that this administration is laying the groundwork to rip away access to medication abortion across the country. This has not gotten enough attention, and I know you'd prefer to keep it that way, but I want you to know I'm not going to let that happen.
I have not seen that study, Senator, and you have not seen that study.
Well,
So how
actually-
can you call it a sham bogus study? Neither of us have seen the study, the underlying data, or the methodology.
Well, actually, that's not true, but I will say this. Mr. Chairman, we have a lot of differences here. I know you came before this committee to present your side of the story, but I am very clear that laying off people, cutting budgets, is not going to improve the safety and efficacy that we count on when we go to the drugstore to get our drugs. And I know that sham studies that try to prove a point that came from a political group is not going to tell the public that they can count on the medications they count on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Senator Peters.
Thank you, Chairman Hoeven, and thank you for talking about infant formula and talking about our bill specifically, and thank you for eliciting a response from our witness that we both really appreciate. So thank you for doing that. Dr. Makary, when I was chair of Homeland Security and Government Affairs, we did a study looking at persistent drug shortages throughout the country. And found that a lot of it is because we're over-reliant on foreign sources for those supplies, and many of the precursors, as you know, are all overseas. And in fact, in that study, when I put it out, I said it's pretty clear based on these challenges with the supply chain that when there is a pandemic, we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult position. 6 months later, that academic study became reality as we dealt with the pandemic, and certainly saw that we had highly efficient supply chains, but they were not resilient. And I remain concerned that the FDA does not have the visibility it needs into essential medicine supply chains, from the key ingredients needed for manufacturing our drug products to the distribution to the patients in hospitals and pharmacies. And these blind spots clearly limit our ability to accurately assess national security risk, including our over-dependence on China in particular for many critical inputs. So last week, I reintroduced the MAPS Act with several of my bipartisan colleagues, which would address this critical gap by requiring HHS through public-private partnerships to essentially map out the medical supply chains using data analysis and to assess all the threats and vulnerabilities. So my question for you is, do you agree that this is a significant concern? And if so, will you commit to work when we pass this legislation to make this a reality?
Senator Peters, I love this topic. It's so important. I'm glad you're raising it. I've written about it in a book in 2019. I've written about it in the Journal of the American Medical Association. I felt like no one has been paying attention. I warned about exactly what happened at the beginning of COVID, and it happened. So I am totally aligned with you that this is an important issue. I think there are root causes that we've not been talking about that we need to talk about. I mean, we can get out a ruler and map out, you know, the supply chains, and I'm not opposed to that exercise, but the underlying problem is that manufacturing has moved overseas. And it's not just one or two things. It is most of what we use in anesthesia to perform surgery. It is most antibiotics. It is most of these cutting-edge therapies. It is the vast majority of generic drugs. And so I totally am in support of President Trump's agenda here to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And we've already had a tremendous amount of success. There are companies announcing moving manufacturing to the United States. We're creating incentives. We're removing regulation. And this is a national security issue. So I am 100% with you on this.
Very good. In April, FDA reported suspending programs to improve testing for potential bird flu virus contamination of milk, cheese, and pet food because of the mass layoffs that occurred. We know that the bird flu virus can kill pets who eat contaminated raw pet food, and it can pose a real danger to humans who also consume unpasteurized dairy products. As you know, the more people and animals who get infected with bird flu, the more opportunities there are for the virus to mutate. And I'm really worried that we only may be a couple, and it's not just me, others are worried that there may be a couple of mutations away from having another potentially pandemic. So my question for you, sir, is with the continued spread of bird flu in the country and the significant personnel disruptions at FDA food safety programs, could you tell me and the committee specifically what the FDA is currently doing to ensure our food is free from bird flu contamination?
Well, first of all, that story was debunked by the Washington Post. It was the normal procurement pause to recalibrate the equipment. And so when that happened, people who were trying to make us look bad, sometimes internally, sometimes externally, said, aha, there were layoffs, and there's a pause in some of the milk inspection, and therefore the cuts may have been related to this or were related to this, and that's going to affect food safety. No, it was a normally scheduled pause to recalibrate equipment. It went through its normal schedule, and it is back up and running, and it's normally done to recalibrate the equipment. The cuts were to 380 communications people. What's the right number of communications people for the FDA? Not 380. 125 travel coordinators, 13 strategy offices, 2,600 HR people, and budget and procurement people. So, I mean, are we not supposed to address some of this redundancy?
My question is, what exactly are you doing to safeguard our food supply and to safeguard the people from bird flu? So that was the question. I think you're prepared for a different question, and you gave the answer to the different question. But the question is specifically what you're doing.
You
Please.
suggested the cuts increased our risk of bird flu, and I firmly reject that. That's not true, and the inspection trains are running on time.
I think I said personnel disruptions. So
there's no personnel disruptions involved.
There are no
in the
personnel
milk
disruptions.
calibration facility that was written about.
So there are no personnel disruptions related to your work on bird flu? Is that what you're telling this committee?
What I'm saying is the
Really?
story that you referenced was saying that our milk calibration facility paused because
I don't
of
remember
personnel disruptions.
I don't think I cited a particular article. I don't know where. Obviously, you're
You may
prepared.
not have.
You're prepared for a question that I didn't ask. and
No,
that's
I mean,
fine.
you referenced
You
the
probably gave a
headlines.
good answer to a question that I didn't ask, and so that shows you were prepped for it. I'm asking you, what are you doing about bird flu? Just answer that, please. Don't give me a runaround about other stuff.
We're doing a lot on bird
Don't
flu.
use your prepared talking points. Tell me, what are you doing to help us and protect the American people from bird flu? Please tell me that.
We're doing a lot on bird flu.
Please tell me
Senator.
that. That's
We've
what I
got-
hear.
So look, when there is an antigenic shift that represents a epidemic threat, when there is human-to-human transmission, that strain that is involved in that human-to-human transition is the strain that we should be using to base any potential future vaccines. And in the interim, as I said in my opening comments, delivering on a universal flu shot is one of our top goals, and there are 2 universal flu shots that are in development, and we are not in a receive-only mode with those developers. We are actively trying to partner with those individuals because it may be that you could come in for a single a single influenza vaccine or a 2-dose strategy or something like that, and be immune for life against multiple different variants of influenza, including bird flu. And so early preclinical data in animal studies has shown some promise that a universal flu shot using a traditional vaccine platform can actually create antibodies to the current strain of bird flu. The question, of course, is, and I think this is really what you're getting at, is if we have a bird flu epidemic or even an outbreak in a human-to-human fashion, what strain is that going to be? Because one thing we know for sure is it's not going to be the strain that's circulating right now in millions of birds. So it is a huge priority for us, Senator.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Doctor, just one follow-up on the avian flu. I've spent quite a bit of time visiting with Secretary Brooke Rollins on that issue as well, and she put out a comprehensive plan to address it, and a very thoughtful plan, because, for example, the issue of inoculation is really, it's complicated, because if you inoculate chickens, and then you got broilers, and then you have trouble with export to Europe, and all these kind of things. So I think she put out a comprehensive plan, but she did it very judiciously, because some of these things we still got to figure out, right? So any comments you have in terms of working with her and understanding that it's very complicated, and as doctors say, we want to first do no harm, but address it in a comprehensive way. Would that be a fair evaluation, and what are your thoughts?
100%. Secretary Rawlings has been on top of this. She has been in communication with the emergency preparedness scientists at HHS and our FDA team, as well as people in the Office of Science, Technology, Policy, to evaluate whether or not we should be mandating preemptive bird flu vaccines to chickens in the United States. Some countries have done it, and I think they made the right decision in saying that does not make sense at this time. Sometimes it represents messing with Mother Nature in ways that we may not foresee. It may drive mutant strains of the virus. So I think we need to be alert and ready, but at the same time, we need to wait until we see human-to-human transmission and see what that strain is before we develop a strain-specific vaccine. And in the meantime, we can advance the universal flu shots that encompass those bird flu strains currently in circulation, provided that they are safe and effective. And, you know, not 100% of vaccines are wonderful. I love vaccines. I believe in vaccines. Vaccines save lives. Any death from a vaccine-preventable illness is a tragedy. But the anthrax vaccine was a disaster. The swine flu vaccine was a disaster. The rotavirus vaccine was removed from the market. We had a vaccine that we had to remove from the market a few weeks ago for a rare infectious disease in the United States. And when the data clearly shows that there's not broad safety, as we're commissioned by Congress to do, then we have to do our job.
And there is concern by producers in terms of if you start inoculating some of the flock, then you actually have the disease in the flock. But then if you're still, you know, keeping that flock, then does the disease spread? Also, as I say, depending on whether they're layers or they're broilers, that makes, so there's a lot that goes into this, and it's a really complicated, very important we address it, but a really complicated issue, and that's why I'm pleased that you and Brooke are working together in the way that you are on it.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, I want to ask about AI, and I don't mean AI as we talked about on the ranch. This, I mean artificial intelligence. You know, talk to me. I hear so much about, you know, what AI is going to do in every field, but certainly in medicine. Just give me, you know, some of your thoughts on not only how we should be using it and what it will do for us, but how we make sure that we don't get ourselves into a problem with it.
Well, we spend a lot of time thinking about cybersecurity and proprietary information. We don't want a situation where AI is stealing proprietary information, and we don't want to expose ourselves to any cyber risks, which is why we have ensured that the AI that we're using to summarize clinical data and background information for our scientific reviewers lives in a very secure space, and the reviewers love it. And it's not just AI to assist in the scientific reviews. We're using AI to identify where we should be concentrating our food inspections. And it turns out the AI can sometimes figure out pattern recognition faster than we can as human beings. And we'd like to use this also to address the issue of illegal vapes coming into our border.
Okay. And how do we make sure it doesn't get off and running on us and we have problems?
We have to keep an eye on it, always. I mean, we cannot have blind trust in anything, which is why all the areas where we are using AI currently at the FDA, we also have a human being reviewing the information and having full access to the underlying data.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Ranking Member Sheen?
Yes, I just have a couple more questions. One is, again, apropos the need to address type 1 diabetes. One of the things that Senator Collins and I have worked on is a more efficient pathway for biosimilar drug approvals that are currently lacking competition. So can you give us an update on what you think is happening in that arena and whether there's any reason to hope that that's going to get expedited, and if there are any other approvals or anything that you need at the FDA to ensure that that is being addressed in a way that allows those biosimilars to come to market?
Well, thank you, Senator. This is a very important topic that directly relates to drug prices for everyday Americans. And there's a reason why when you watch the news now, you're basically watching, people dancing in the fields and singing with these drug ads nonstop in the commercial breaks because they are so expensive. And so the companies have figured out that if they can get a few people to, shake their doctor down to prescribe one of these drugs to them, or I guess somehow let their doctor know that they're a candidate. It might be a little insulting to the doctor that they don't already know it, in my opinion. But that's why these ads are running nonstop. And so there are low-cost biosimilars that can be made available by the FDA, approved by the FDA, and that process is too slow, in my opinion. We have to look at whether or not we really need to require confirmatory trials for each biosimilar. I mean, we don't do that for generics with regular branded pills. We don't say, well, you make a generic with the same molecular structure, go out and do a confirmatory trial. I think we need to look at that. There's a bill, I believe, that Senator Rand Paul is putting forward to take a look at that. And then finally, we can look at whether or not we can sort of approve a class of interchangeable drugs. That is, that they're very similar in the class, and so an interchangeability provision could help create more incentives, because we want to incentivize companies to make safe biosimilars.
I agree. You mentioned in your opening statement the seizure of vaping products from China. One of the things that I've been concerned about for a very long time is the increased use of vaping by young people, and the numbers have gone up dramatically in the last 10 years, and also the health impacts of that we're not even, I think, fully aware of at this point. So can you talk about what more you're doing at the FDA and how you did that interdiction, who you're working with, again, what more can be done to get those products off the market?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this topic. A lot. We can do a lot more. And I've realized that what's happening now is these illegal Chinese vaping products designed to attract children. They are video game vaping products with an inhalation port designed to addict young children so they can vape as they play these games. These fruit video game products that are so small, they have an inhalation port. What happens is these products that are banned in China and made in China show up in U.S. ports, and what's been happening, I learned, is that they are set aside, the FDA looks at them, and then we say, well, you know what, these shouldn't be coming in our country, we'll put them back on the ship they came on, and then the ship goes to another U.S. port and will come in through it's basically we're 100% porous. It's been a joke, and they've been laughing at us. And so we are going to stop that. And we have incredible interest at DOJ, at Department of Homeland Security, and we are creating an endeavor that is going to basically say, we're not going to send them back anymore. We're going to confiscate or confiscate and seize these products because we've got to get serious about them. These are designed to get kids addicted, and there are kids in America today who are addicted. They know they're addicted. They come from good families. They're good kids, and they can't stop. And that is something that we have to address. There are high schools in America now where kids are saying half of the kids in high school are addicted to these vaping products. So we cannot get burned again like we did on opioids and Vioxx and other things where the problem is so far down the road, it's hard to undo some of the tragedy. And so this is a top priority for this administration, for this president, for this secretary, and for me.
Well, I agree. I think we ought to right out ban vaping products for anybody under a certain age, certainly. And one of the other things we need to do, as you know, is to get a treatment for people who are trying to get off vaping products, because one of the other selling points that they use is that, well, it's a way to get cigarette users to stop smoking. They can vape, and the harmful impacts are not as serious. But I'm pleased to hear that you're doing everything possible. And I don't know if you, again, if this is an area where you need additional authorization or support, but I think there are a number of us in the Senate who are all in to try and address this because it is having a huge impact. I've been to those schools in New Hampshire where I've talked to students who have gotten hooked on vaping who can't get off and who don't have any aids to help them do that. So it's something that we've really got to address.
Thank you so much, Senator. And as you know, we confiscated today $34 million worth of illegal vaping products and e-cigarettes. And so that announcement is coming out today.
Thank you.
Doctor, thanks for being here. Did you have anything else that you wanted to express for the record?
I appreciate the input and the feedback. And look, I'm on a listening tour. We're going to be traveling around the country, myself and some of the other FDA leaders, meeting with industry leaders, developers, inventors, scientists, academics. And we want to hear how we can perform better. We don't claim to have all the answers. We don't claim to have the truth on health, but we do have a lot of intellectual curiosity, and we plan when we see something that needs action to take action. So I want to thank you and this committee for the input that you've provided and made available to me.
We appreciate you being here today. We look forward to having you back as well. Questions for the record are due by next Thursday, May 29th, and then we'd appreciate responses from FDA within 30 days. So
Can't wait.
again, thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you, Senator.
Yep. We are adjourned.